Hello there. I'm Todd Weller. Thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn served by the FileMaker team here at Cross IT. Before we dig in, remember that you have a chance to win lunch on us if you leave a comment or ask a question during the live stream. Just make sure you have your email address so that we can contact you. For today's Lunch and Learn installment, we're going to be looking at FileMaker custom functions. This is a subject we've mentioned during a few of our previous Lunch and Learn webinars, but we've never stopped to specifically examine them. Today is the day we address that oversight. We have a lot to cover, so let's dive in. All right, so we're going to be talking about custom functions here today. And what we have going on is, of course, we want to define what a custom function is. And the best definition, or the easiest definition I could come up with, is that, of course, it is a function that is custom. Now, of course, I just made all of my high school English teachers mad at me because you're never supposed to use the words you're defining in the definition. So we came up with a different definition. And a custom function is that product of one of the advanced tools in the FileMaker platform that kind of packages, if you will, the formula that's constructed of standard functions, operators, constants, and even other custom functions, so the formula can be easily reused anywhere in the database file where it is defined. And the way that we do that is that these newly defined functions appear under their own category in the functions list of the specify calculation and edit custom function dialog boxes. And so that's how we access it. It's probably one of those things that's probably easier to see rather than just to continue talking about it. So we're going to do quite a bit of demo here as we take a look at things. All right. So a lot of times, at least in my own development, my custom functions are a result of something that I find myself having to do over and over again, even if it's a simple calculation because of the time involved. Of course, that adds up. And then you also have this idea that, well, what if I need to make a change to the calculation? Then all of a sudden, depending on how many times I've used it, I have to use it everywhere where that calculation occurs. Well, by putting it inside a custom function and referring to that, that gives us one place to make those changes and edits, but it also makes it easier to reuse within that file. And so that's what we're going to look at today. And one of the first custom functions that I had started working on was for declaring a file name. We work in cross-platform solutions, so we're both on Windows and Mac. And when you're specifying an output file, which would be like export records or save send records as, one of the options in the dialog box is to use a variable, of course. And this is what that dialog box looks like. I'm sure we've all seen it. And there you see where I have my file path variable. And just because of the type of person that I am, I like to use the full path. I don't use the relative paths. I like using the full path so I know exactly where that file is going. And I found myself constantly using this same case statement to determine my file system so that I could append whether it's file mac or file win when I create that file name. And so that's what started me on this journey of building a custom function. So I thought that would be a cool one for us to go ahead and take a look at first. All right, now one of the things to understand is that with custom functions, you need to be using the advanced tools. Now, in previous versions, there was FileMaker Pro, and then there was FileMaker Pro Advanced. So if you wanted to define a custom function, you had to have FileMaker Pro Advanced. Now, to use custom functions, those work anywhere. But to define them, you needed the advanced version. Now that we just have FileMaker Pro, what you find is that you need to have these advanced tools that are right here you see under the preferences that you go ahead and enable the advanced tools. Once that's done, you usually have to close FileMaker and restart it so that those advanced tools appear. And then you're able to, among other things, start building your own custom functions. Now, typically when I'm working on a custom function, I don't start directly in the custom function editor. Is I actually go ahead and pull up the data viewer, which is another one of those advanced tools. And then that lets me kind of build my function in the data viewer, kind of kick the tires on it, test it a little bit before I go ahead and move it and actually define the custom function. So let's go ahead and get rid of that one that's left over, and we'll just go ahead and create a new one. And like I said, this is a very simple case statement, but you're also probably asking, well, I thought, the idea of, getting that information, was, pretty easy as far as, a function that's already in there, which is one of those get functions, which is just get system, find it here, and it returns a number. Okay, but see, that's the problem, is that it returns a number, so then now I have to use that number to then make my choice. So by building it and baking it into this custom function, then all of that's taken care of, and I don't have to remember to do that. So what does the custom function look like? All right. All right, so we've got that. So we'll just go ahead and start our case statement because it returns a negative number when it's Windows. Just set it like that. Oops. If I could type today, don't forget our end. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll test that. And it returned the appropriate text. Like I said, it's one of those things, it's not a hard calculation, but if you make a typo, type something wrong, you're going to have problems later on. So if you got it correct inside a custom function, then you can pretty much use that from anywhere. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that now. Go ahead and switch out of the data viewer, and then the area for managing our custom functions is here under the Manage Database. Database security value lists. Custom functions is down here towards the bottom of the list. Now this file already has a few custom functions in it, but we're going to go ahead and just create a new one. All right, and you can see here's our edit custom function, which looks a lot like the edit calculation dialogues that we see all over FileMaker. So we want to go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to go ahead and call it this for get file sys, because that's what I'm doing. All right, don't have to worry about, you can declare function parameters for this particular one. We don't have to worry about it. All right, and then we just have to go ahead, and I'm just going to paste in my name, or the function that I copied over. You'll notice there's a couple other options here, is that you have this availability, where it's available to all accounts or only accounts assigned with the full access privileges. I have to admit, I don't know that I've ever used this particular option where it's okay for everyone to have access to this custom function. Obviously, when the calculation is going to be evaluated, everybody's going to be able to do that, but they're not necessarily going to be able to see it if you have it only for the full access privilege accounts. And this might come into case where it's not a simple function like this, but it's something that is specific to the business rules of your company or some proprietary calculation that you want to protect. You would maybe want to consider using that. Like I said, I've never had the need to do that, but just to be aware that it is there. Also, when declaring the function name, most developers have some type of naming convention that they're going to use. I like using, as you can see, this little lowercase fn to go on the front of it, so that way I know that it's a function that I declared. Others use an underscore cf for custom function. Others use special characters, but they do something to kind of set it off apart so they know that that is one of their custom functions that's in this file. And the reason why you would want to do that, and it's something actually that I just learned, is that if you create a custom function that happens to be the name of a function that FileMaker adds to a future release of the platform, and the name just happens to match, then when you open the file in that newer version, it's going to use the built-in function in place of your custom function. So that's where having some type of prefix or modifier for your custom functions will kind of prevent you from that. Like, what are the odds of that happening? Probably pretty slim, but it's something that's worth being aware of. And obviously, the naming convention doesn't matter, just as long as you have one and you're consistent with it. And like I said, where that helps out is if I go over here to my calculation names, I'm scrolling down through, and I can see that, okay, these four that are right here, are the ones that are custom functions that I have defined. All right, so we can go ahead and click OK. Everything looks good there. Click OK to save that custom function. And now if I switch back over to our data viewer, and if I just go ahead and like I said, it type fills in when you're editing expression and using it in a calculation. It's going to go ahead and fill that right in for you, just like it would for a normal function. And if I go ahead and we'll just clear that out and evaluate, and it looks like everything is working correctly. So good for us. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. All right, so where can you use a custom function? Okay, well, a custom function, it can be used anywhere in the file where it's defined. So anywhere where you can use a calculation and have access to that list of functions, you're going to be able to pull up your custom function and use it. We already had kind of hinted on this, that you could be used by any user or only by users with full access privileges. One of the cool things is that it's available across multiple platforms. So whether you're creating a file and then using a local copy on an iOS device, or if it's hosted on FileMaker server and being accessed by iOS devices, they are going to have access to all of those same custom functions. You can also use them to replace some third-party plugins for some purposes, depending on what you're using those plugins for. Obviously we looked at a very simple example, but I've seen some custom function out there that are very, very complex. All right, and then you can, like I said, you can use a custom function whether the Use Advanced Tools option is selected or not. Okay, you won't be able to edit or make changes if the advanced tools are not on, but you will be able to use them in a calculation. Okay, so that was some more talking. Let's go ahead and look at some more examples. Actually had one that didn't make the list. I want to actually go back to our first example, because I realized that just having that the file system was helpful, but there was more that I needed, because usually you're looking at your document path, okay, whether that's going to the documents folder, the desktop, the FileMaker folder, or the temporary path. I was always doing something there. And so I thought, let's go ahead and take this custom function and expand on it and make it a little bit more user-friendly and less things that I have to do and think about. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll go back into our Manage Custom Functions. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this one rather than edit it and completely change it. All right, so obviously we want to give this one a new name, and this is the one I just called simply File Path. Okay. Now this one here is going to have a couple of parameters. The first one that we want to look at, of course, is the document name or file name. All right, and so what you would do is you just go ahead and type that into the top box, click this plus sign, and then you can see it added to the list of functions. All right, we go ahead and add the destination. All right. All right, now one of the nice things is if you can change that, and you can see it's kind of giving you a preview of how that function is going to be listed when you pull it up, is that by using the arrows to you can rearrange the order of your function parameters. You can also, if you don't like the name, you can get in here, and then if you just change it, click the pencil, then it changes the name for you. So I'm going to go ahead and change it back. All right, now one thing to keep in mind is that for the default functions that are in the FileMaker platform, there are optional parameters. Unfortunately, when you're declaring a custom function and you use that function, you need to make sure that you have, if there's 3 parameters, you need to have 3 parameters that you're passing to it. Now, however, of course, as you're setting up your custom function, you can add things in there that if parameter 3 is a certain value, then it gets ignored or something else happens, but you still need to kind of build that in. You just can't not pass it a third parameter in those cases. All right. So we're going to go ahead and build on this. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space, and because what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things all at once. And so I'm going to go ahead and use the let function here. All right, and so the first thing is we're just going to go ahead and declare the file system, which is based on the case statement that we just had here before. Let me me just fix up my spacing so I'll sleep better tonight. There we go. All right. And now the next thing we want to look at is the rest of the file path that's between that file system and the actual document name. So I'm just going to put in another variable here. And this is another case statement. All right, and this is where we're going to use our parameters. Now, one of the things, you can type the name out, but also if you have your cursor positioned where you want it to be and you double click, it'll go ahead and fill that name in for you, so you don't have to worry about some kind of typo messing you up and then all of a sudden your function doesn't work. So we're going to say if the destination is documents, so I can spell, all right, and then we're going to go ahead and let's see, to get the, all right, and then we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to cheat here and just do a little bit of copying and pasting. All right, so if this is desktop, so we have that, and then of course then our default value here is going to be the okay. Now obviously you can set up your custom function any way that you want if you were to repeat this particular custom function in your own files. I picked the temporary path as my default because typically if I'm exporting a PDF or creating a PDF to attach to an email or doing something 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be working in the temporary path. So I figured let's just go ahead and have it default there. So even though I have to pass a destination parameter, I can put in anything and it's going to spit back the temporary path for me. All right, so those are the two things that we're going to use in the let function to declare, and then our last step is just to come down here and go ahead and concatenate everything together. So we start with the file sys, and then we go ahead and get our file path, and then we just add on our document name that we're passing in as our parameter. All right, so we go and click OK, and click OK. Let's go ahead and go back to our data viewer. And we'll just go ahead and edit this one. Like I said, we've got our file path. It's telling me that it is a custom function. It pulls in and lets me know what our, so we're just going to put sample file.xlsx, because maybe this is going to be used for obviously an export or something. And I'm just going to put that in as temp. And so now when I hit evaluate, I've got my full file path for that file going into the temporary folder. So again, now with this custom function, anywhere where I'm using it, I can just go ahead and drop it in. All right, so what are some of the other custom functions that we want to take a look at? A few that I found that have been very helpful allow me to work with dates. And what that looks like is that I'm going to go ahead and just pull this over just so you don't have to go through the pain of watching me type. I'm just going to copy and paste this over. All right. And this is a custom function that was found from an online source. It was written by a gentleman by the name of Darren Terry that just returns the last day of whatever month of the date that you pass it. Okay. Now, right now I'm in the data viewer, and this is where you have to, as you're building it in the data viewer, because obviously we're not able to pass in any parameters, so I'm just going to go ahead and quickly throw this in here. Oops, there we go, so that I have that declared. And what this is doing is it's using the behavior of FileMaker's dates, where if you have a 0, okay, is the day, but you have the month, that's been advanced, then it actually goes back to the last day of the previous month. So let's see, today, this is April, so we'll just go ahead and see, and it correctly returns the fact that 4/30/2022 is the last day of this month. So if I want to go ahead and now move that into my custom functions, just go over here, back to my custom function editor, create a new one. This one. Month, the date. Go ahead and add that in. Now I can paste my custom function in there, and then just get rid of that extra, variable declaration that I had there while I was temporarily testing it in the data viewer. And so now I have my custom function. Now, of course, because of how we're using it, where it's not just based on the current date, that it's something that is, dynamic because of the parameter that we're passing. If I go into, edit this and say day of the month, and we'll say see what happens here, and we evaluate it, and it says, okay, well, if you're in May, now we need the date to be 5/31/2022. So like I said, very helpful. Another simple function that can be used for displays, things like that, and certainly not something you're going to have to want to type in every single time. Another one that goes along kind of with this idea of the dates is one that I've worked on to format dates, and I'll tweak it depending on the file, whatever the customer has requested. And that allows me to put the dates in a specific format. And again, we're just going to go ahead and do a copy and paste here. All right, and what it's doing is it's getting the date. Okay. There we go. We're just getting the date from our parameter. And then we're just doing some formatting. We're extracting the year, extracting the month and day, but when we get both of those, we're just adding to make sure that we've got a 2-digit day and a 2-digit month. And then I'm just putting it in year, month, day format, because this kind of goes back to my file naming for exports, that if I wanted to put some kind of date code on it, I just wanted it to be in the order so that when it sorts alphabetically, it's still in date order. Okay, so we've declared that custom function, which it looks like I've still forgot to put the name, but we'll just go ahead and add a new one here. All right. All right, and if I evaluate that, then you see that it's in the desired format. So again, not a hard function, but certainly one that you don't want to have to be retyping all of the time. All right. Okay, so the next one is another one that I found through an online resource that I find myself actually using quite often. It's one that I've renamed it. I just call it FoundList. And what it does is it returns a list of all the values in a given field for the current found set. Now I realize, can't remember which version it came along, but one of our summary fields that we're able to declare is a list of IDs. And it essentially accomplishes the same goal where whatever the found set is, it's going to give you a field with the list of IDs, which is great. However, that's going to add some overhead onto your file, where this is just something if you need it, on the fly, occasionally, a found list is a great way to do that. And the way this works is that it uses something that's called recursion. And what that is that a normal FileMaker function, you can't call it. It can't call itself typically. All right, but custom functions can, and what that allows you to do is it allows you to set up repeated logic. Now with FileMaker 18 and the wow function, we're able to loop through chunks of logic within a calculation. So recursion and this idea of using a custom function isn't as necessary as it used to be, but it still certainly has its place. So that's what we're going to go ahead and look at here right now, and that's where like I said, I typically set up my calculations as I'm working with them in the data viewer. Unfortunately, because you haven't actually declared the function yet, you aren't able to fully test your recursion. You're only going to get kind of essentially one pass through, but it's a good place to start, and then you can move it into your custom function editor to finish everything off. But again, just to save time, I'm just going to go ahead and do the cut and paste here. So let me get back into our custom functions. Go ahead and create a new one. All right, let's get down here. And I'm going to go ahead and one thing that I've been skipping is that you have the ability to leave as detailed of comments as you want to leave. So typically it will tell you what the function does, who it was written by, and whatever the source was, so you can kind of keep track of that. And so there's a couple parameters that we need to declare for this one. One is the field name. All right, and then our start position. Okay. And so what we're doing here is we're just using this get nth record, which is a default FileMaker function, and telling it what the field name is, and our starting position, which you always set to 1 when you call the function. And it does that, and then we have a case statement here. Like I said, and this is where the recursion comes in, as long as the start position is less than the total found count, we're going to insert a carriage return, and then we're going to go ahead and call the same function again. Okay. Now the field name stays the same, but then all we have to do here is we just increment our start position by 1. So if this is index equals 1, then with start position equals 1, then this is field name 2, and then you would have carriage return, found list 3, and so on and so forth, so that you get the final list of names. All right, so let's go ahead and click OK to finish declaring that. All right, and go ahead and in here, we'll just go get rid of this one. All right, so we've got our found list. And so like you can see here, we've got, this is a database of contacts. So if I just go ahead and pick, I don't like that one, we'll go with city. All right, and then we'll just say start at number 1. And when I hit evaluate, it'll take it a second to think about it. And so what it's doing, like I said, this is where it's doing that recursion for us to generate our found list. I probably should have picked a slightly smaller found set, so that's my bad on that one. Let's see what it does here. Oh, okay. Yeah, I should have limited my found set, because when you use this idea of recursion, you can have up to 50,000 iterations, and I just happen to have 50,000 records. So I hit the limit unintentionally, and so you guys are getting to see what happens when a recursive custom function is unable to evaluate. It's going to give you a question mark as a result. All right, so let's see if we can get out of this here. Come on. I know you're thinking, you're working hard. All right. Okay, so let's quickly make a change here. All right, well, apparently it's not going to cooperate, so I won't be able to completely show you that today. I apologize for the slowness on this end, for not having the foresight to, oh, there we go. So now it's still thinking. let's just start over again, shall we, folks? Okay. All right, so promise some resources. Obviously, the Claris help is going to be one of your resources if you want to get some information on custom functions and things. Probably the largest online resource for custom functions is the FileMaker custom function library that has been set up and is kind of maintained by Brian Dunning. You see the link to his website there. There's also a new one that I just found that has some specific ones for math functions, and then of course then you also have your the various FileMaker forums that you can go to. Certain developers may have a set of custom functions that they've developed exclusively that you can go from their site, or people may be offering ideas on any of the various FileMaker forums. But let's take a look at those first two that I mentioned. Like I said, the one that's probably most well known is this one here for Brian Dunning, and it has, like you can see, over 2,300 custom functions to pick from, with a when it was added, what the name is. Of course, you are able to search for that custom function. Now that's one of those things where sometimes you have to anticipate what another developer would have called their custom function versus what you would call it. But there's quite a few options in there that you can get in there and take a look at. The other one is, like I said, this is from an ebook that I had found, and there's a lot of custom functions in here that are specific for number calculations and some more math. But you can get in there. It has the code, and then you would just copy and paste. Now, one of the things that we have not talked about is that all of the custom functions that I was setting up is that we were bringing them over via copy and paste, which certainly works. But one of the nice things that FileMaker has done for us is that we're able to go in here and let's see here. There we go. Is that you have this import button. All right. And so you're able to go in and let's see what our custom functions are in that other file, and then you can just go ahead and select them. Now what I'm going to do, just so you can kind of see what it does, is that we already have FoundList because that was the last one that we created. But let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and add in and select it again, just so you will see what happens. So if I click OK, it tells me that 3 items were imported. There was one that was renamed because of a conflict, but there weren't any errors, so that's a good thing. And you can see all it does is if you have an existing custom function of the same name, it's just going to import it, and it's going to increment a number at the end, obviously starting with 2. Okay. This is another custom function. I can't remember where I found this, but you can see the author there of this custom function, and then I've just kind of maintained it. And this is one that I use all the time when I'm doing error trapping in scripts and I want to tell the user what happened. I'm just able to grab the error number, and then based on what the error number is, then I'm able to return a text string that means something to the user. So again, it's not a hard calculation, but this is certainly not something you're going to want to have to retype every single time you go to use it. Okay, so that's one of those places where using a custom function is very helpful. Here's another one that I find myself using all the time. Was written by a gentleman by the name of Fabrice Nordman from One More Thing, and what it does is it will return either the name or the internal ID of an object, whether that's a table, a layout, a field, script, those kinds of things. That just helps kind of insulate some of your script steps from name changes. Because if you're referring to something in text, but then the name changes, if it's enclosed in the quotes, it's not going to pick up on that. So this is a way to make sure that you're referring to stuff by ID, but then you can still get the name if the name has changed. So a very helpful function that I've used quite a bit. So I'm sure there's probably more that we could get in here and talk about. Again, I apologize for the problem with the recursive function. That was my bad for not making sure I had a good-sized found set to start with. So let's go ahead and see if we have any questions so that we can wrap up. I want to be sensitive to everybody's time here today. All right, so so one of the first questions is, how do you update a custom function? Okay, well, unfortunately, the custom function, if you need to update the custom function, you would need to come into your custom function editor and make the change. Okay. Typically, that's not a big problem because, again, because you're referring to it here, it's going to be everywhere in your database. And so you only have to make the change once, and it's going to propagate to everywhere that custom function is used. However, it's only for that file. So if you have a multi-file solution and you go ahead and tweak a custom function in one file, you're going to have to make the same change in all of the other files so that that custom function still evaluates the same way everywhere. So just something to be aware of there, that there's, like I said, it's not as hard as having to change it everywhere that calculation is used, but it's certainly something that's not just going to, you make a change in like a master file and then it just propagates everywhere. That we're not able to do that. Okay, so we just covered how importing of the custom functions. Again, there's the names. Now, if you are able to have a custom function that will refer to other custom functions, that as long as you're importing them together, you won't have any problems. However, if you happen to import a custom function and then happen to miss one, what will happen is that it will comment out everything in the script so that it doesn't really return a result, and then it's up to you to go in and figure out. Now, what you will see is that most developers, when they get in here in their notes about the script, they will make a note somewhere of if there's any dependencies on other custom functions, just so that you know what to be looking for if you would happen to run into those situations. But that's really the only gotcha when you're importing, is that if you're importing a group, make sure that you do have all the ones that you need from that source file when you do your import. All right, and then the last question that we got here was, are there any limitations for custom functions? Well, I found a few. The first one is that the function name is limited to a maximum number of 100 characters. I don't recall ever running into the limit of that, so it's probably not too much of a big deal. There are a maximum number of 30,000 characters, and this is true whether it's a normal calculation or a custom function, because obviously you're in the calculation editor, and so that's 30,000 characters. That includes text, numbers, any referenced fields, the operators, the functions, and parentheses. So I checked out a couple things online, and based on number of average words, 12-point font, 1.5 point spacing on the lines, you're looking at 20 to 30 pages of text if you have like 1-inch borders around everything. So again, I've never written a calculation that's so complex that I needed all 30,000 characters. And then, as we just saw, there's a 50,000 recursive call limit if you're using a custom function recursively. This also applies if you're using the while function inside a custom function. You're still going to have however many repetitions. Now, obviously, with the set repetitions, you're able to make some adjustments there to get additional calculation power out of that, as far as the number of times that it can loop through. All right, so I think that is all of the questions that we have. I don't see any others that have come in. Just a couple upcoming events to point out here. The first is our next meeting of FMBerg, the Pittsburgh FileMaker Developer Group, takes place on Wednesday, May 4th at 6:30 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting, which means you have the option to attend in person or join us remotely. For details into RSVP, please visit www.crossit.com/fmberg. And because it's Pittsburgh, you got to put the H on the end. Okay. All right, so at noon on Wednesday, May 18th, we're going to serve our next Lunch and Learn. For our next topic, we're going to return to layout mode, which we've looked at a few times here since the beginning of the year, and we're just going to discuss the portal object. We'll look at using portal tools to display the related data and some of the various setup options that we have there. All right, so again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. If you like what you saw and heard, please click the thumbs up and share this video. If you haven't subscribed yet, we do ask that humbly that you do so, and you can also hit the bell to get notified anytime we go live. Now, some of the content presented as part of our Lunch and Learn sessions are the result of your questions. So if you have a suggestion for a future topic, or if a specific FileMaker problem has you stumped, please submit those topics and questions by emailing us at nutshell@crossit.com. Your idea or question may be the featured topic of a future Lunch and Learn. From all of us at CrossIT, we are glad to have served you. Have a great day.